was. And there was a great story in the book that showed that there was a drug that was tested exclusively on men and they decided it didn't work. 15 years later, they resurfaced the drug. Lo and behold, it did great things for women. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that this is not a question of, is the world unequal towards women? Because that question is answered. The question is, where do we go from here? Did we get here? So the way that I see this event is as a bit of a touch point. So despite the odds, women are and continue to be absolutely exceptional. We make fantastic businesses. We are exceptional scientists. We are incredible athletes and artists and parents and friends and everything else. So I feel that I need to be reminded of this regularly. And I feel that I need to be reminded of the fact that the world wasn't built for me and that the world needs to change. And I figure if I need that reminder, you will probably do too. So that's kind of why we're here. And as I said, I've got the pleasure of speaking to Danae, Leah, and Sophie. So thank you so much for being here. If we could just jump in with a very intense question, if you could all just introduce yourself, I'll call you up, and tell me what your womanhood, if anything, means to you. Isn't that a juicy starting one? Danae, could you go first?
Goodness me, what an exciting. So you want my introduction and what womanhood means to me? Okay, cool. So I am Danae. I am co-founder and CEO of a startup called Vala. And our goal is to make legal support more affordable and simple for everyone. And we're starting with helping people take their employers to tribunal, even if they can't afford a lawyer. And what my womanhood means to me, it's quite an interesting question. I think I've never been asked that question, because you don't get asked about your womanhood unless it's within the context of what society defines as very female things. I think it is the air that I breathe. It's just everything that I've ever kind of known. So I don't know how to answer that question. I'm gonna pass it on.
Good. No, I like it. Sophie, could you go next, please?
Hi everyone, happy Thursday before a hot weekend. I was like, it's gonna be hot this weekend, yay. So I'm Sophia Mono and I'm the founder of Stuffs, which is Scotland's women-owned social media agency. So we create campaigns on social media for brands all across the UK, Scotland, and now the world, which is really, really exciting. And I'm also the social entrepreneur of a beauty brand called Perth, which helps homeless women out of homelessness through the radical act of self-care. I say radical because it shouldn't be as radical as it is, but you would be surprised just how much people overlook self-care for women in vulnerable positions. And it's actually something that we all take for granted, coming home after a long day and having a hot bath, or, like getting your favorite conditioner for your hair. But for vulnerable women, this small act is really revolutionary for them and can really change their prospects and their chances of moving out of homelessness quicker. So that's a really lovely thing that I do. And my womanhood, for me, is like Dana, it's not something I've thought about, but I've definitely been challenging myself of what womanhood means. I think growing up, womanhood was very soft and airy and fairy and didn't really mean anything. And as I'm growing into my womanhood, because I definitely feel I am growing into my womanhood, for me, it's having a voice and having a strong voice and not being afraid to, especially growing up, I was definitely, women are quiet, women don't speak up, you don't want to be a Larry woman, you want to be a nice, polite woman. And I'm just like, I just want to turn every idea that people have of women on their head. And so I am bossy, I am loud, I do get angry, I have an obnoxious laugh. All the things that, women are kind of told that they shouldn't have. So I think for me, it's being challenging and kind of using my voice.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Sophie. Leah, bring us home.
Okay. First, can I just say Sophie has the best laugh I've ever heard. That is not an obnoxious laugh. It's an amazing laugh. So hi, everybody. My name's Leah Hutchin, and I'm the founder and CEO of a startup called Appointed, We help businesses to connect with their customers and turn those connections into meaningful, either face-to-face or virtual interactions. So we help them take bookings from their website, their social media, their apps, basically wherever their customers are, and then turn that into fantastic experiences, and then manage the customer through that whole process. So I am very lucky to work with lots of different businesses, from solo businesses right up to big Fortune 500 and those kind of businesses. So I see lots of women in business, and I totally agree with Hazel that we are excellent at everything. So I definitely have that. I think for me, my womanhood, and I'm very thankful for going last because I had a bit of time to think about it, but I'm still not gonna, like, literally nobody asks you this, so definite kudos on the question. I think almost for me is kind of the opposite. As much as I agreed with everything that Sophie said, I feel like I'm totally leaning into my womanhood as I'm getting older rather than fighting it. So I love, like, I am really obnoxious at times and bossy and all of those things, but I also love that I kind of am giving myself permission to be softer and to not like use that, but to just embrace that and be like, do you know what, I am way more likely to cry than get angry, and that's kind of okay, because probably statistically women do, I don't know the stats, but and like do things that are surprising and are vulnerable and are moments that are actually quite special. Like the thing that came to my mind when you asked the question was really early on, my first board meeting back from maternity leave. I had to go and pick up my daughter, and she was sick at nursery, and I breastfed her whilst carrying on our board meeting. And like at the time it was just two male kind of non-execs that I had, and that was fine, and that felt quite a privileged position to be in as a woman. I was like, do you know what, I've probably broken a barrier for you, I've definitely broken a barrier for me. And so yeah, I feel very privileged as a woman in business and a woman full stop, that we are in a position now that we can challenge things that wouldn't have necessarily been done before, and I really enjoy as a woman embracing that womanhood.
Amazing. And actually that you've touched on something there which I was going to maybe go to later, which is we talk about, you know, women in business events or just women events, and it's like, well, there's like billions of us and we all have such different experiences, and once you bring in intersectional women, it's like it's very difficult to be like, well, women have this and women are like this. So I really appreciate your honesty and your individual perspectives, because that's exactly it, right? Is that being a woman is so different for all of us, and it means something different, and our ambitions are different, and the way that we want the world to look is different. I hope that we would like it to be a bit more equal, but I love your responses, and I love that they're different. Obviously this is more of a business event, so I wanted to slightly move this a little bit more towards business, and I kind of opened this event being phenomenally negative, and I'm interested to hear if that resonates with you in terms of all of the kind of struggles that women go through. And Leah, I remember hearing from you at a conference quite a long time ago now, a few years ago, and you said that you brought men into meetings with investors in order to be taken more seriously as a founder. Can you talk to that a little bit more and kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so definitely. And it was less that I brought them in, I was told to bring them in, which I think was the thing that irked me the most. So yeah, I think that like, I definitely would love things to be more equal. I recognize they're not, but I also have many amazing guys that I work with, you know, up and down kind of. But yeah, this was when we were first raising investment, and I was advised that actually if I had any guys, and this was really early days, so I had at the time a wonderful guy that was doing some pro bono kind of consulting work to help me build my financial model. and I had our first ever employee who was a developer, but not, you know, not somebody who wanted to get up and pitch investments at all. And I kind of dragged them both along. So I was like, I've been, and I think the interesting thing was like it probably in equal parts irked me, and in some ways I was really grateful for the honesty, because I probably naively would have gone in and pitched for investment without those people there, and would that have been the right, and I didn't end up getting investment. But it was almost like I've kind of wrangled with it a lot over the years, because it was like, it was probably good advice, you know, if that person knew that the room wasn't going to be a welcoming and generous in terms of making investments into a solo female founder who didn't have the trappings of what they thought was a good business. So in a way I was like, I like your honesty. I like the fact that you've, you know, it's not a popular thing to say, and at least you've said it and you've given me the best chance to succeed. And I think, you know, that is what as women we absolutely need. So kind of really un-PC thing to say, but he was giving me the best possible chance. But yeah, it really pissed me off. I'm the swearing. But yeah, like I guess it is what it is. We've been really lucky. We've raised like £2.5 million, and I don't think I've ever the majority of our investment comes from Scotland, and I've found the Scottish ecosystem really supportive, and I don't think I've ever really kind of suffered from not having the guys in the room. But yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it?
So much to chew on there. Lots to talk about the patriarchy. We'll get to the patriarchy later. Looking forward to that. But Danae, obviously a few years down the line you were raising. Did you feel like you experienced anything similar? Do you feel like things have changed? What was it like for you?
Yeah, so I was raising most of last year, which was even more interesting because I was we opened our round pretty much the week after lockdown started, and closed. We raised the bulk of our money in September and then closed the final bit of the round in December. So yeah, 2020 was raising. And yeah, I think in some ways I was lucky because I had access to people I might not have had access to because of the circumstances in lockdown and things like that. Do I feel like things have come on? Well, the stats say absolutely not. Fewer women raised money last year than the years before in the UK and the US, if I recall correctly. And I remember looking at the odds. Like it felt like the odds for Kate and I to actually raise our round, because we're two female founded team, and I think only 1.6% of all the funds went to teams like ours. And I was just like, okay, well, I know what I've got cut out for me. And yeah, I think I didn't encounter a lot of kind of overt ridiculousness, although it was quite interesting. Sometimes the work that we're doing at Vala is literally challenging power. And I definitely had a few investors say to me, well, why would I invest in a product that someone could use against me? I wouldn't want a woman to make it easier for a woman to sue their employer because of sexual harassment. That might make me not want to take a meeting with them. And I was like, okay, don't think I'll be asking you for money. So yeah, definitely there was a little bit of like good old fashioned, machine twirling villain kind of sexism going on. But most of the time it was just plain old, you can't, fundraising requires you to get in through introductions largely. You typically have fewer introductions available to you if you're just starting out. And if you don't have that big of a network, and one of the things about being a woman is sometimes you don't have that same kind of access to the network. Kate and I have both worked really hard on our networks over the last few years, so we kind of were able to tap into that more. But it was it was something that was on my mind a lot. I don't feel like it. We raised almost everything we wanted to raise, so it was great. Sometimes it felt like I was running into a headwind, but in the end we got there. So yeah, I was pleased about that.
Amazing. And you've touched on something there that I don't think we'll go into in great detail, but there's something in there about how I just highly doubt men ever worry about sexual harassment in the workplace, and yet women need like weapons, essentially, like to come armed, to have resources, to have apps, to have applications that we can use if something was to happen. And I just, the emotional labor attached to that of just, am I safe in this workplace? And am I safe in the long term with this investor, with this manager, with this boss, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a completely, it's a different mindset. And I can't imagine not thinking in that way. Not that it fills up 100% of my brain, but it's certainly, it's part of my life. And I take a lot of meetings with a lot of different people. So I'm just interested that kind of was brought up. But Sophie, you might have a different perspective on this because you're in the creative industries, which I suppose is more kind of women-led. Do you feel like you've experienced sexism or any kind of bias because you're a woman?
In, when we think about the agency world, actually advertising agencies, creative agencies, they're mostly owned by men. And I often find myself being one of the only women in the room in this very traditional kind of like Mad Men Boys Club scenario. And, it is hard because a lot of the time it's who you know, and they have this well-knit club, so they pass work to each other, they get all the tenders, they're very well known, and you are trying to come in and disrupt it, and you do. And I have sensed and seen where they come together and it's like, oh, no, we're not going to let her into our space. Now, granted, there are some amazing, like the Graham who owns Jam Hot in Glasgow there, but it's literally one within this, it's like a drop within this ocean of male-owned agencies. And at first it used to really intimidate me, and I just knew that they saw me as the kind of woman who wanted to have a go at starting an agency, and that really propelled me to really make this work and to go out and get my clients in the places where I knew they weren't. Going to women-owned businesses that they weren't going, it was this men's club that they would all go to, and purposely going to these places where they weren't, and using my underhand as the way to kind of, and the naivety that they had about me as a woman in business to my advantage, because I knew they weren't at these places, they wanted the big names. So I would go to all the other places where they weren't. I just absolutely swept up, because they weren't there. So I think for me, it was intimidating, but I've turned it into a real advantage point for me because I'm going to the places where there aren't. So it's literally no competition. But I know there will come that time where I will have to go for these tenders and go into these big, rooms and win these contracts. But I'm just trying to focus on my lane. There was a time where I felt like I was becoming like the typical male agency owner. And I really had to shake myself. I was like, Sophie, what are you doing? That's not you. Like, why are you being weird? Stop being a weird dude. That's not you. I just own who you are. So it's so nice to have that back. I think the pandemic definitely brought me back to remember why Stuffs is different from all the others, because that's who we are. It's in our DNA. So yeah, although I've not fundraised, I've definitely felt that in the advertising world.
Amazing. I love everything that you've said there. I feel like there's a little fire under me, and I've got this vision, all these women in business being really mischievous and like taking, there is this assumed naivety. And certainly as, a younger woman, I there's nothing I enjoy more than walking into a room and everyone kind of is a bit worried. And then I'm like, no, I actually do know what I'm talking about. Sorry to disappoint. So I love that. And actually, I think that there is something in there of, almost having fun with it. Almost, it's not ideal. It's not ideal being a woman in business in the sense that we're consistently overlooked, consistently underfunded. So if there is space to have a bit of mischief, if there, if there's space to take advantage of someone's kind of presumed naivety, love it, delicious. And also on the topic of Mad Men, if anyone is in the creative industries, there is a fantastic book called Mad Women, and it is written by a woman who was there in the 50s and 60s, and she was in the room with all of the men. She was one of the very few writers back in those times, and she kind of talks all about how the sexism was rife, but she still loved the job. So it's a great read, and I really recommend it. But just moving on, I'm hoping we can find yet more positivity, yet more optimism. And I just would love to kind of think about things that maybe are changing. So I might think about, for example, Mark Logan, who did his TEDx talk on women in leadership, which is fantastic to see. I've also had personal conversations with Mark Logan where he has discussed things like paid period leave and wanting to bring that into Skyscanner, and there was kind of pushback in various directions on that. But that is a sign of change. That's a huge sign of change. So I would just love to know what you think is changing. Maybe Danae, you could start. What you've seen for the better, maybe, if there's anything.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of communities that I'm a part of. So kind of when I started looking for communities that can support, there's some fantastic ones that have been a real help for me. There's stuff like Fem Street. It's a online community for female founders, and there's a huge, wonderful vibe in that community of just women supporting each other. I think there is a lot more conversation now about the intersectional aspect of women in business as well. And I think that's a massively huge step forward, because like it's traditionally, I think, these sorts of things have been centered on white women, and a lot of affirmative action and things like that in America have been really only beneficial to white women, when actually with the Black Lives Matter protests and the movement happening last year and things like that, you're seeing a lot more conversations and a lot more kind of recognition of the intersectionality of the problems that are going on. And to me, that's the only real way that we're actually going to actually solve any of these problems, is by making it intersectional and really recognizing that, you know, as a white woman, I have a difficult time in business, but it just doesn't compare to the other kind of experiences that people have. So yeah, I think to me, that's the big thing. There's been a lot more recognition of that, which I think is actually going to make the difference. Unlike some of the stuff that I think just plays around the edges, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And actually, Sophie, do you mind if we go straight to you and in terms of that intersectionality, I suppose there is something really clear in what Danae said, that is anything that feels like it's benefiting women is more than likely benefiting white women, young women, straight women. And how do you kind of, what's your perspective on that in terms of intersectionality and things improving?
Absolutely. I think there has been a lot of talk. I think talking is always the first step, because you've got to have the conversations to bring awareness to the issue. But I'll be honest, as a Black woman founder, I have experienced overt and covert racism in business, and it's very hard. And I've always been like, right, Sophie, you speak up about this, because it might make someone else think next time about what they do. And I had a situation with a board of trustees recently, and it was a man who was kind of challenging the work that I'd done, who had no experience in marketing. You know, it's like a plumber, you know, evaluating the work of a social media marketer. Like, it's chalk and cheese, you know. I never go up to an architect and be like, should have done this, because I don't know anything about architecture. But at the same time, it was allowed to happen to me, and the advocates that I thought I would have in that situation didn't advocate for me. And I recognize I have a real unique situation here to not back down and to challenge this particular man's point of view and decision process, even though he was never going to reverse his mind, and never, even though they weren't going to hold up their contractual obligations. I was able to stand firm and show them, you cannot do this. I sent them links, the articles about, you know, the statistics around the livelihoods that are affected, because it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's also Black livelihoods matter. It's our livelihoods that matter so much. And I think that's the thing that people need to recognize is, you know, if you want to empower Black lives, you've got to empower Black businesses, because then that allows people to be, you know, autonomous and make decisions for themselves. So I've really enjoyed, although it's personally painful, I've really enjoyed being able to challenge people in a board situation that your thinking is wrong. Here's X, Y, and Z, and I'm not going to back down about it. And that's been absolutely fantastic. So I think some of these conversations need to continue, and I said they need to keep happening so the message gets to people at the top, because some of this stuff is unconscious bias. People don't know until you tell them. And I've really, really enjoyed actually telling people how wrong they are. It's been actually really nice. You're wrong, and here's why. It has been really, really nice. And I think what I'm really, really looking forward to, and you are seeing it with more funds, with more investment rounds, purposely looking for minority women, you are starting to see the action follow up. And I think that's the really, really exciting thing, is that the talk is slowly starting to change to action. And I think that's the really exciting bit about the possibilities for the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Leah, how about you? Do you feel like things have improved? Obviously, you talked about breastfeeding your daughter, and that's a pretty big deal. Do you think that's a sign of better times?
I think, like, I could not agree more with Sophie. That's a good example of, I guess, my version of doing that. It's like, okay, well, I could sit here and let my daughter squirm and not be well, because the polite thing to do is to finish off. We just had like a tiny bit of board to do, and it was like, no, I can do this. Or I can breastfeed and make her feel comfortable and make the board probably feel a little bit uncomfortable and they were amazing, and they didn't. But I think absolutely, like, it's in every one of our power, but also it's every one of our responsibilities to do the little bits that we can, and if we each do, then that does flywheel, doesn't it? And it's, I saw somebody put on about talk with my daughter, and I felt so uncomfortable when Adam asked me to do that, because it was Adam just like wanting to have a bit of fun with it and be like, oh, Leah, would you bring on Hedy, and it'll be really good fun. And I was like, oh, is it just going to be one of those cringe moments? But actually, so many people have said, oh, I loved that you did that, and it like made me feel like, oh, I can do this. So yeah, I think like each of us making each other just that little bit braver, and hopefully, yeah, as you said earlier, Hazel, having a bit of fun with it, like taking that chance to be a bit mischievous and yeah, express ourselves. It does all help each other, and I think it's a really important thing to do. So I think it's really nice to see us all getting braver and a bit more spirited.
Mm-hmm. And I remember vividly Impact Summit 2018 with Hedy strapped to your front, and it was incredible, and it was shocking only in the best way. And it almost was a thing of like, why does this not happen more often? Well, people have children. Why are we ignoring that people have children and have childcare? So, I mean, I thought that was incredible. I don't think I've seen anyone with a baby or a toddler on stage since, but maybe that's because they're all hanging out the back one.
Well, it's probably because she puked over me in spectacular fashion not long afterwards. And everyone went, yeah, that's why people don't do that, because I smelt of sick for the rest of the day, going to all of these amazing talks that other people were doing, kind of being like, oh, sorry. So, yeah.
I do also vaguely remember that. And I suppose actually in total contrast to what we're talking about now, I kind of want to flip this on its head and talk about the patriarchy, as I mentioned earlier. And I feel really aware that as a young woman in business, there are times when it makes sense for me from a safety perspective, from a career kind of moving on perspective, I'll enable the patriarchy, right? And this happens across everything, where women basically make choices every damn day of, am I going to fight this, or am I going to do myself a favor and not get in trouble today, and not get into a fight today, and not get into a situation where they pick someone else over me because I was difficult. And that's something I grapple with all of the time, which is there are things I'm very, very strong on and things I am very opinionated on, and I would never back down. But there are other things where I think I can't do it. I haven't got the energy today. So I would really, first of all, I would love you to validate that, but no obligation. But I would love to know your perspective on that. You know, is that right? Is that not right? Should we be so stark in our beliefs that we never ever back down? Do we play the game? I don't know how it works, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I would love your opinions on it. Leah, your mic is already off, so can I jump straight
Poised and ready. No, just because like the story I told earlier about the investment thing has caused me to think a lot about this, and I really wrangle with it because yeah, I did as I was told. I took 2 guys, they stood behind me silently, and I did my thing, and I've beaten myself up about it so much. But actually, so my take on this is, if you can, and if you feel that day that you know you've got it in you, then absolutely do, and do it with gusto and with aplomb and all of that good stuff when you've got it in you. But when you haven't, or just when sometimes things are too important, like, we shouldn't hold ourselves back just to die upon, you know, a cross, kind of, not die, you know what the saying,
We've got it.
I'm not going to die on that hill is what they say. And if you don't, if you, like, that day you kind of don't stand up for smashing the patriarchy or whatever the version of it is on that day, then you take the win and you use that win to then give somebody else a hand up and make sure that somebody else then comes and joins you. And like, just using it in that real positive way of going, sometimes stuff just has, you know, sometimes stuff isn't perfect, but when I get there, I'm going to make sure that things are so much better. So I'm going to bring other women into the boardroom with me. I'm going to, you know, whatever that looks like in your role. So making sure that you make the most of it when you get there by trampling on people. Trampling on the sisterhood. You don't trample the sisterhood, but, you know.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much, Leah. And Danae and Sophie, I'll leave it open. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Absolutely. So I was at an event, it was like a fireside chat, and there was a young woman who she was a horse, right? Like, she had horses, and then she ended up building like a sports science startup for horse health, Fitbit for horses, basically. And she was a young woman, and her she was probably one of the only few women on the call, and she said, "What advice do you have for me as a young woman? Because I'm finding that I'm not getting taken very seriously in these investor calls and things like that." And I said, "Well, you know, I heard," because I actually hadn't heard you tell the story, Leah. I just kind of heard it secondhand. And I said, "You know, I've heard from one. I heard about one startup founder that I know who actually took guys with her to the meeting to make herself look better and to make it work better." And I said, "Do that." I said, "Do you have any guys in your team?" And she was like, "Actually, yeah, I do. I have this guy. He's like an experienced developer." And I was like, "Tell him to agree with everything that you say and bring him to the meeting." Like, hack the system. Like, who cares? Like, we've got to use everything that we can. And it was so funny because actually in that call, I think that made the organizers a little uncomfortable, because I was just like, blast the patriarchy. But to me, it's like, I feel exactly the same way as Leah, where it's like, to me, sometimes it's too important. And like, when we thought about our cap table, for example, we were just like, okay, we're not going to compromise. We will turn down money, and did turn down money where we didn't think it matched up with what we wanted. If we didn't think that they were going to let us build the company that we wanted to build, the way that we wanted to build it, and if we thought that there was going to be any problems, we would turn down money there. And, you know, I will push back whenever I feel like I safely can. But I mean, I will use any trick I can to get to a stage where I can build the kind of company where I can level up the people who get overlooked by everyone else. Like, it's, yeah, and I'll do it with a smile on my face. So yeah, I'm right there with you, Leah.
Thank you. And Sophie, anything to add to that?
Would say I wholeheartedly agree with your point, because there's a lot of pressure on women to solve this problem of inequality while working within this structure of inequality. And I just think it's really important for women to cut themselves some slack and not, you know, keep themselves up all night worrying about, oh, I didn't do what I should have done. Men have not been doing what they should have done for thousands of years. So if you get it wrong like one time, don't beat yourself up. And it's also opportunity for our brothers to learn. Because imagine if you're a man and you understand that, wow, I'm having to come into this meeting because this woman won't get taken seriously. And I know how crazy talented she is. I know how hard she works. The penny drops for them as well. And they recognize that, oh, wow, this is actually a really, really big thing. And that impact of working together and them seeing in real life can really, really go and drive things forward. So I think it's an absolutely critical approach. And I think it's really important for women to cut themselves some slack, because at the moment we are carrying the brunt of solving this inequality problem. So it's like, how can you break down the patriarchy while you're also under it? It's a tough thing. It's the same with the burden to end racism. Falls on people of color, ableism, it falls on disabled people, the burden is on the people who are most oppressed. I think women should cut themselves some slack, and I'm definitely one for when the opportunity is there and I can take a shortcut, work smarter, not harder, is the motto at the end of the day, because you'll just burn out women and your livelihood, you need ease as well. You deserve some days to take it a bit easier. I would just love for more entrepreneurs, female founders, female investors, students who are finding themselves on this journey to cut themselves some slack.
That's fantastic. Thank you. All incredible answers. I feel much better. Thank you for soothing my soul. I'm really keen to get into the questions. There's loads of questions in the chat, which is really annoying because I've got loads of questions that I wanted to ask you. But I will go over to the audience. So the top rated question here is, how can men be good allies to women in business? And I'm just going to open up the floor. So I'll see whoever turns off their mic or turns on their mic. I never know which one it is. Danae, thank you.
Sponsorship. So I like sponsorship rather than just mentorship would be my number one answer off the top of my head. So don't just give people advice, give them opportunities, spend your social capital to give them the opportunities. If you're in an organization and you have an opportunity to put someone forward to take on a project, sponsor the person who might have been overlooked otherwise. Give introductions to people. I have a lot of great ally friends who did so many introductions for us when we were fundraising and just opened up their black book to us and just said, okay, anybody in my network, I'm happy to introduce, just let me know what you need. And it makes a huge difference. So yeah, that would be my answer, is spend their capital on underrepresented people.
Yes. Magic. Thank you. Leah and Sophie, anything to add? No? Feeling good? Perfect.
I'm feeling good, because I'll give an example of when that happened. Like, it's really important to introduce, because I'm absolutely fascinated by the idea of gentlemen's clubs and these private members clubs and the golf club experience, boys club, where deals are broken because it's not what you know, it's who you know. And recently I had someone make an introduction to Island Records, this huge label, and he introduced me to their audience team, who then introduced me to the team, and they're now a client. And it was just so refreshing to just see a man just be like, look, I know you're talented, you can do this yourself. All I'm going to do is I'm going to open the door, you just walk through. And that is so, so nice to see, because sometimes even just getting in the room is so hard. So if they're like, look, I've got the key, I'm going to unlock it, you do the rest. So that, fellas, please don't overlook how much your networks are of value to us, because we don't get on the golf course, we don't, we're not in the private members clubs, we're not in the gentlemen's club. You're, like Danae said, your little black book, it would take us, it's taken centuries for men to build that huge network. So you do us a huge favor by allowing us into that world.
Yeah, amazing. And actually this reminds me of an article. I mean, there's a lot, do you know what, I'll say it, I'm not even afraid to say it. There are a lot of men who write articles about entrepreneurship in newspapers across Scotland, and they're all very similar looking. And some of these articles will literally start with, as I was on the golf course with this tech founder, and it makes me want to scream, because it's like, we never get to that place. We don't get to be on that golf course having I don't even know where you're finding time to do that. I've got emails to write. Like, it blows my mind. But sorry, that was, I'm very passionate about that. But there's another point here. There's a great question, and I kind of have an add-on to it, which is, it's from Anais. It says, did you have women as role models when you were growing up, and who are some women that you admire today? And I just wanted to touch on something for the women watching as well, that this is something that I think is in a real transition period, and it's uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is something like Louise O'Shea. I don't know if you know that name. She's the CEO of confused.com, and she recently came out with some absolutely wild article that said that when she had a baby, as the CEO of confused.com, she set up an office in the labor ward. So she kind of gave, like, her perspective as like a woman leader, which of course men love, is I never stopped working. I'm just as on it as the men. I never took a day off. I had the baby as I was writing emails, and I thought that was the most toxic thing I've ever heard in my whole entire life. So I suppose the question being, where there are women in leadership who are not necessarily embodying what I would hope women would embody, which is not that you have to go the other way, but that there is a choice, and that everyone is welcome to make that choice. I suppose leading on from that, who would your role models be? Who do you really look up to? Who do you feel really has it right? And that's open to everyone as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because it's the concept of, men have actually been damaged by the patriarchy. So their ideas of work, ideals of work, never show vulnerability. Some of the stuff that Leah says she's really happy to do, never show vulnerability, never take time off sick, never cry and be disappointed. They've actually been really damaged by this themselves. And then we look back when, like, the 80s power suits, women were fashioning their business journeys after these damaged men. I think sometimes there's still that trickle effect of, we feel like if we're not shaping ourselves after these, and I use the word broken men, not them, but after this broken system.
We're looking at you, Jack.
That's actually the wrong thing. And actually we should all be trying to find this new norm, which is, there are times when you're really determined, but there's also times where you take time with your family and take that break that you need. You don't get back to that email right away. So my woman who I really look up to is a woman called Sharmadean Reed, and she's got an MBE. She's absolutely amazing, and she advocates. So she shows pictures of, like, her son in a board meeting with her, or she'd be like, I've just switched off my email today, going to get my nails done. But she also takes you into her fundraising meetings, and so she shows that whole journey, which I think is really, really important. She's having a mental health breakdown, she'll talk about it. I think it's humanizing entrepreneurship, isn't it? Sometimes entrepreneurship isn't humanized. It's like, special, even for men, it's like they are supermen and they raised £1 billion, and it's still really, really damaging. I think what we need to do is humanize the face of entrepreneurship. And that's why I think events like this are so important, because it just shows we're just all people. We have our fears, we have our high points, we have our low points, we have our good points. And I think it's that I love entrepreneurs that humanize the journey.
That's such a great answer, Sophie. Thank you so much. Leah, Danae, anything to add to that?
I think for me, I so admire, to echo, events like this are so important. It is other entrepreneurs and other founders where you can see that honesty. I grew up in Blackpool in the 80s, and Margaret Thatcher was probably the only person I could think of, when reading the question. I was like, who was a role model? My nana was my role model, because she ran a B&B in Blackpool and she worked so hard and she built a business and stuff. But I had no concept as a child. And then, even having built a business, I still don't look really to the kind of high up role models. I look, amongst my friends and the people who are in the trenches alongside you, because you do get to see the real side of them, don't you? And I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, in lieu of Margaret Thatcher, thank God for Michelle Obama. is what I would say. Danae.
Leah is one person that I've thought about a lot in the early stages. Absolutely. Like, because you can see her doing, like, she's done it. And it's so funny because, like, I totally echo what you mean, Leah, because I was helping out these two women who have started a startup in Scotland. And they're about 6 months kind of behind Vala in terms of the fundraising stages and things like that. And one of them said, you know, well, we originally thought we might raise this amount of money, but actually we're doubling it because we saw you do it. And if you can do it, then we think that we can do it. And I was like, hell yes, you can. Yeah. Like that, like, it's that peer kind of, like, I think that's huge. So I completely agree. And the other person that I've been looking at, like Stacey Abrams over in America, her book Lead from the Outside really reminds me of what you were talking about, Sophie, with the you learned, like, you couldn't get to the table, so you built your own table. You started going into those networks that people ignored and actually serving them and building your business base there. And that book from Stacey Abrams is basically like a blueprint for how to do that. And I've been looking at, you know, women like her, women like Chanel Miller, who isn't a businesswoman, but just such an incredible kind of voice about finding your own voice and things like that. I've been reading a lot of those kind of biographies lately and looking at women who are overlooked. Arlen Hamilton, it's another great example of this from Backstage Capital, like just trying to find, you know, these people who are overlooked, way more overlooked than I am, and just try to learn from their perspectives, because I think that's a really nice way of doing it as well.
Mm-hmm. We just have a few minutes left, and I'm absolutely gutted because I could talk to you three for hours and hours and hours, and I think we should at some point over drinks. But in that not being able to happen, in this kind of closing period, it would be great to just have a kind of brief answer from each of you of really what would you say to your younger self, and what would you say to younger women entrepreneurs who are looking, they're maybe 5 years behind you and they're looking to achieve the kind of things that you have achieved. What would you say to them? Whoever would like to go first, it's very open.
My mute button there. That is what I would say to them. So this is also not what I would say to them, but on the theme of the question from Danielle on what the matriarchy means to you, it kind of ties in with what I would say. One of my team once said that I was like a lioness when I was protective of them because somebody like really gave us some beef, and I got very protective over my team. And I would say to my younger self, be a lioness. And that is what like the matriarchy would mean to me. It's like the positive, like take all of that female spirit and use it in a really like fierce way.
Stunning. Thank you.
And I would, I would say that you can have it all. And what that means is, you know, I doubt, you know, maybe she did, you know, Nicola Sturgeon, you know, growing up would have imagined that she would be first minister, or Barack Obama would imagine that he would be the first Black president. You can achieve it all. It takes hard work, but don't be scared to dream. Like, dream the biggest dream that you can dream. And the reason I say this is when I first started on this entrepreneurial journey, I felt like I was very lucky to be here. Like, oh, you know, I'm very lucky to be in this room. I'm just a lucky girl. But actually, no, I worked very hard. I had a vision, and now I'm being very purposeful about my success. And I'm literally chipping away slowly, but working for the top of my personal mountain. And that might just mean, you know, I run the best wee agency in Scotland, and it's tiny, but it's the best that I do. But absolutely dream big and go for your goals, because I think often we just don't believe it's possible, and that limits ourselves. It limits our ability to achieve because we don't even think it's possible. So yeah, I would absolutely tell myself that all of your wildest dreams are possible. Just keep going.
Thank you so much, Danae.
Mine might be slightly controversial.
We love a bit of controversy.
I find sometimes I'm quite motivated, and I did some coaching, a lot of coaching over the last year as Vala was ramping up, and I met a lot of women who had so much fantastic like so many fantastic skills and such a great idea who just weren't giving themselves the permission to actually like go and do something. And I often was just like, think of the most mediocre white guy you know. He's off running a business. Why the hell can't you do it? Like, you can do a better job. Like, I just, and sometimes I find that very motivating myself, when you're just like, well, look at these idiots over here, and they're doing fine. Surely I can do a better job than that. And you know, so yeah, that would be my advice, is look at these idiots over here. They're doing fine. Like, look at the people running the country. Look at the people running America. Look at all these people. Like, if they can make that work to their, like, God, we are fine. Like, we are absolutely fine. Just give yourself permission to do it, because you're going to do an amazing job. You're going to bring way more thought, way more kind of perseverance and diligence and everything else to the problem than a lot of people who have been coasting for a long time. So just like, give yourself the permission and do it.
What a fantastic line to end on. And I've said it before in my job, I'm very, very open about this. I love women. I love women-led businesses. I love supporting women. I like women in the room whenever I'm in a room, and that has only been exacerbated tonight. I'm absolutely thrilled to have spoken to you three. What a trio of fantastic role models that we have in Scotland. I'm literally like, I'm going to like dance to dinner now, because I just feel so thrilled that there are people like you who are vocal, who are energetic, who are caring, and who are showing up here right now to speak to us. I feel so privileged. So thank you so, so much. Dec, I hope that's us on time, and I hope I get a big tick next to my name for having us on time. Do you have anything to say?
Yes to both, Hazel, and I just wanted to say what an incredible talk. And yeah, I wanted to kind of stay on stage actually. I just wanted to kind of show how, to come back to your point, so just how important it is for guys to be the opposite passive. And there's so much that I'm going to take away as, you know, a white straight guy. You know, I guess I was saying this to Hazel earlier. You know, I guess I'm top of the privilege ladder, you could argue, you know, and I think for me that brings so much more responsibility. And yeah, I just love the event. And the only negative side of the event, which I know Paul mentioned in this question, was, you know, the lack of guys attending. So I guess still work to be done, and you know, I'm hoping I can help at least a small bit to spread the word. But I loved it. I wish we could go on for hours longer.
Next time. Thank you for flagging that. Thank you for saying that there are not enough men here. It's really nice to hear you say that. So.
Could not say it. And to come back to timing, so you guys, I'm not sure if you guys have a countdown time on your Vimo. We managed to extend for another half hour. So if you fancy hanging around the tables, continuing the conversation, I mean, so many different amazing topics within it. I'll be kicking about. I know some of you guys may need to head off, but we've got an extra bit of time. So
amazing.